Hello and welcome to today's video, which looks at your literature writing skills and in particular 6 key mistakes that students make, and I will also show you how to put those right so that you begin to write really good literature essays. In this video I will show you what a typical question looks like and what it really means. Then I'll go through the typical 6 mistakes. There's a bonus one here because I'm also looking at comparison poems. Essays. Then we shall look at 2 extracts from a student who understands literature but hasn't got the essay writing done, hasn't sorted that properly. And then we shall look at 2 extracts from a student who is very good but not perfect, and you'll see the corrections there and then a much better final page. Okay, so I've set up a dummy question. Compare how poets present ideas about society in The Echoing Green and The Chimney Sweeper. These are both poems by William Blake if you're interested, but I've deliberately kept it with text that you don't know, so you'll just focus on the actual techniques that I'm trying to teach you. The next thing you need to know is that all questions are actually about the author and their view of society, no matter what the wording of the question is. You know, even if it asks you about a character, well, they're really asking, how does that character inform you about the author's view of the society in which that character lives? So no matter what the question, society is at the heart of what the examiner wants. Right, well, here is an overview of the 6 things that will be common to all your essays. Number 1. Refer to what the poet is saying about society at the time in which it was written, in both poems in this case, because it's a poetry comparison. Link this to the author's purpose. Why are they trying to show us this about society? Number 2, embed quotations in your sentences. So don't have them just at the beginning of the sentence, but have them inside, or don't end the sentence and then have this means that. Number 3, use words an expert in literature would use, and you've always got to think about that. What shows me to be a student of literature rather than just any old student? And in these extracts I'm going to show you, words like connotation, utopian, dystopian and tone will always occur, and these words will be relevant to every single essay you ever write. You'll always be able to write about the author's tone, link it to their purpose in showing us a view about society. Avoid referring to the reader as you. The reader is never you and it's never I, it's always we, because that's the language of the expert. We want to include everybody, so they can't disagree with us, and that's the technique that you want to use. Always name the method. This is slightly annoying, but it's always in the mark scheme. So every time you quote, there will be a method. I don't know why symbol has appeared twice here. Let's just get rid of it. Obviously, I thought that was super important. One of the reasons it is so important is everything works as a symbol in writing, usually, especially description. So you will always be able to use this word, symbol or symbolises, no matter what the text. The other word that teachers don't often teach, I think, but is actually relevant to every single text, is the use of contrast. You will always get an author juxtaposing, contrasting a positive thing with a negative, or a time, future and past. There's always a contrast. You will always spot that. And then there's the obvious ones, metaphor, simile and personification. And obviously if you're not sure which it is, or it could be a metaphor, it could be a simile, I can't remember, then fall back on imagery, because that always describes all of the above. Number 6, this is the way that students really do fall down. They just name the method and leave it at that. But once you've named the method, then explain the effect on the reader. How do you do that? Well, as soon as you start using words like symbolises, suggests, implies, reveals, represents, once you've got those words, you're always explaining the effect on the reader and you'll always get the marks. And then finally, if it's a comparison, make sure that you compare the poems equally by alternating paragraphs. So one paragraph on one poem, one paragraph on the next, Do not write about all of one poem in one go and then all of the next poem in the other go, because you'll miss stuff out. Right, let's have a look now at a student who hasn't quite got it right. In The Echoing Green by William Blake, he talks about society being on the echoing green. However, in The Chimney Sweeper, he talks about society being like a little boy and his family. So what's wrong with this? Well, we don't need by and he. We can just go to William Blake talks about and writes about is better. Good use of the word society. It's showing the examiner that you understand the question, but also that you realise that all texts are actually about the society they're written in. Instead of talks about, you should use the word represents or portrays, something like that. In The Chimney Sweeper, he is suggesting that the boy is dirty. You can see this because he compares the boy who is black and he is amongst the snow. And this is a skill where you need to embed quotations. So black is a word in the poem, it should be in quotation marks, and snow is also a word in the poem and should be in quotation marks. I should explain that this is a reference to the child being covered in black soot. He's a chimney sweep. It's not a reference to skin colour. This is making him stick out like a sore thumb. So actually that does mean what you want it to mean, but that's actually a technique, and it's that technique I referred to earlier. It's contrast. So this contrast does something. And I should have said earlier, you can see this is one of those things that you should avoid. Remember what you should become. It should be we. Okay. As he is all black, again, black should be in quotation marks because it's in the poem. This symbolises, well done, that he's cancerous, an excellent idea, or linked to death, and people won't like him because of that. So we can see these literary words that show this is a student of literature. Linked, symbolises, contrast, represents. They won't like him because of that. Furthermore, this is the reason why he is out amongst the snow, needs the quotation marks again, in the first place. Well, that's great, but now you have to link that to the writer's purpose. Why is the writer showing us the character this way? What is that trying to say about society at the time? Right, now I want to jump down to these two paragraphs here. This is what the student wrote, and this is how I've changed it. So this also gets at society. Gets at is not really formal language. Society, well done for including it. As if they thought about the situation this poor little kid is in, as he has to work all day to work on a little bit of money so he can just about live, but he can't afford more clothes than what he's got on. Now you can see that's all colloquial. It's all the language that we'd use when talking to a friend. And so the way round that is to explain the idea. So what's the idea of the kid being poor? Well, it's called poverty. What's the idea of the child not having many clothes? Well, it's lack of. What's the idea of this situation that the student's in? Well, it's dramatised. So let's see how that sounds now. This criticises society instead of gets at, which encourages parents to exploit their children. Exploit instead of getting a little bit of money out of him. Dramatised by the boy's poverty and lack of clothing. So by explaining the idea of something, using that word that explains the idea, you will be able to sound much more like an expert. And how do you do that? Well, you take the adjective he is poor and you turn it into the noun. It is poverty. You take the idea of not being able to have many clothes. Well, what is that as a thing? As a noun, it's a lack of. So you turn it into a thing, an idea, and then you just sound more expert. Well, you probably want to see how a student does it correctly, so here we go. The Echoing Green and the Chimney Sweeper show different aspects of society in the 19th century. So very formal language. However, the student knows what these different aspects are, but they haven't told us. And so that's why I've got this note here. Be specific, spell it out, because not only does that help you when you're writing your essay, because your essay will then spell it out, but it tells the examiner you've got these clear ideas. Firstly, William Blake writes a utopian poem about happy people, dancing and singing and laughing in a peaceful, green environment. Well, that's great. You've got lots of things that the writer's doing all in one sentence. But why is the writer doing it? You have to link that to the writer's purpose and bring that back to this idea of what they're saying about society. So not a strong start yet, but stronger than the previous one. Next, we have this. This is highlighted by his use of auditory imagery. Excellent language, auditory imagery, that an expert in literature would use. And you will always be able to use that in your essays whenever the writer is using alliteration or sound. Laughing, singing, and bells' cheerful sound, that should be a comma there, that was my mistake, all have connotations of people having a good time. Furthermore, Blake writes about the children and adults and elderly all having fun. This could show that Blake wished for such a utopian nation with people of all ages living happily and harmoniously. So you can see all that is about the society, isn't it? That he wants it to be utopian, and then she's defined what utopian means: people living together, people of all ages, and living harmoniously without conflict. By his inclusion of a sage, a wise old man. Now, she didn't have to explain that, but it's there to help us because she's saying old John is the sage. Sage is also a word that you will always be able to use to mean a character who is wise, but it also includes age. They have to be old. Who is sitting under the oak. Oaks can represent old age and wisdom. So well done. Excellent use of this vocabulary that literature writers use, students of literature. But look, the author's purpose is missing again. Why does he include this sage? Why does he show this utopian vision? What's he trying to say about what his society is actually like? Is it like this vision, or is it the opposite? Now we can leap into her ending, and this ending will explain the author's purpose. On the other hand, Blake's other poem, The Chimney Sweeper, takes on a tone that implies that society is corrupt and maybe even blind. This is highlighted by the fact that he writes about a poor working child with parents who have abandoned him. So we've got a clear purpose here to show that society is corrupt. His parents are gone to pray to God and his priest and the king. See how that quotation is embedded? It fits into the sentence. And they make up a heaven of our misery. Again, an embedded quotation that fits into the sentence. And these last two lines and the metaphor, so make up a heaven is a metaphor, that imply that religion was clouding people's judgment and the church and the monarchy were turning a blind eye as they were involved in this terrible corruption. So again, the purpose is there. The author wants to expose the terrible corruption, not just of the church, but also the monarchy. The child is crying, weep, weep, in notes of woe, because he is alone, working in a potentially fatal job, and his parents have turned a blind eye. And again, to make sure that she's included the author's purpose, she names the author here. Blake felt very strongly against what children and women had to do to earn money in the 19th century, that's society at the time. So this poem is probably an articulation of his feelings towards society, that it is corrupt. So hopefully you can see how to write really confidently about your text by always going back to those key things. And here they are. Test yourself on them. See if you can remember them. See if they make sense. If not, rewind the video, watch it again, and you'll see how it works. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more, and good luck in your revision.